Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today we are talking about Avenger Accountability. Who are the Avengers accountable to? Who should they be accountable to? And how does this play out in the first Avengers movie, in Avengers Age of Ultron, and in Captain America Civil War? All that and more after this commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. My name is Matthew. I'm your host. I'm joined, as becoming a little bit frequently these days, by guest Paul Hoppy. Paul, how are we doing today?
Doing pretty good.
Cool. Well, I'm glad we can get you back. For those who haven't heard it yet, Paul was one of my many guests on the recent 100th episode, super episode, where we had a panel discussion. And there was a couple of interesting questions that came out of that one that we Paul and I decided we wanted to dive into further. In part because it kind of circles around the issue that really started this whole venture, the idea of Team Cap versus Team Tony, which I think Paul and I debating while getting 2 a.m. food at a casino playing poker was a big part of what inspired this podcast to begin with. And rather than just talk about that question at the heart and soul of it is the idea of accountability. And that's one that we see come up quite frequently in the Avengers movies. And for this, we're basically counting Civil War as an Avengers movie, because it really is. It just happens to feature Captain America.
It's Avengers 2.5, for sure.
Right. Well, and plus, saying that there are 5 Avengers movies actually sounds much better than there are 4. And Civil War makes a really nice kind of pivot point between the first 2 and the last 2.
Okay.
But either way, going on, the heart of the topic then is this idea of, if you have superpowers, to whom are you accountable to? And accountability can be taken in any way, any of a number of means. It can be, who do you talk to and just kind of bounce your ideas off of? Who do you have to get approval from? Who is it who can set rules that decide what you do? Or even, who is it that can tell you what you should and shouldn't do? There's all sorts of different levels of accountability. There's all sorts of different ideas of who you should or shouldn't be accountable to. So let's just start by that. Kind of just framing the topic to begin with. Paul, when I say accountability, what do you mean by that? What kind of does accountability mean as you understand it?
Yeah, well, when you say accountability, what I mean is basically when somebody does something, there are consequences. This is a law of nature, right? This is how the world works. But in society, when somebody does something, then some of those consequences can be explicit consequences that are enacted by other people, right? Or by sort of society as a whole. So when I think of accountability, that's basically what I'm thinking about is if a person or a group of people do a thing and that thing is, I guess, controversial would be the place that I'd start, then I think it's incumbent upon other people to assess those actions and basically decide whether there are consequences, whether they think there should be consequences for those actions, and if there are, then to do what they can to enforce them. And I'd say that in our own world, we're kind of having a reckoning with the idea of accountability, right? And I mean, the entire nature of, crime and punishment and policing is all about accountability. I mean, it's also about control and it's about a lot of things. I guess to restate that, I'd say the conception of it is theoretically about accountability. Right. And so when we look at, who we want, like superheroes or enhanced people to be accountable to, I think that's in some ways, that's a pretty direct sort of allegory to, our present situation.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have people whose job it is, in theory, to protect us. And so the question becomes, what right do we have to question those who are protecting us in terms of how they do so and how they don't? And like with police, it is in theory should be pretty direct. Of we pay them, they're hired on behalf of us. Superheroes have always fallen in the kind of this nebulous world. And I like the way you frame it in particular, because I also think to me, it's interesting. There's two parts in our world right now where we're having very different but very related discussions about accountability. One of them is about the police and government in general, in terms of how accountable are they to the people they're supposed to serve, or not accountable in many ways. The other, though, I think, is about cancel culture, the debate that's happening. And I'll admit, I hate that term.
Yeah.
But just
it's
this
used
whole
disingenuously quite frequently, but that doesn't mean there's nothing true there.
But there's certainly, again, there's another level of accountability. And I think that helps us to frame the and I'll say, I think one of the ways that the cancel culture debate often gets screwed up is that people mix those two levels. Because, and let me back up there a second. What I mean there is, I think, as you said, there are sort of official levels of accountability. You know, like if I commit a crime, in theory, I am accountable to my fellow citizens, and the government will enforce that by putting me through a justice system and having some penalty on me. Chick-fil-A is a company that is accountable to its customers. And it has done some things that I find highly objectionable, and I don't think the government should sanction them for it. But I've decided, as someone who used to love Chick-fil-A, to hold them accountable in my own way and stop shopping at them. And many others have done the same.
Yeah,
and
it's been a major sacrifice for me, I have to say.
Yeah, he's a vegetarian. You did miss out on some really, really good fries, but I also understand you there. Probably fried in animal fat, actually. So you never missed out.
I'm good. I'm good.
But yeah, I mean, or like, with J.K. Rowling or with many of these other figures, and I think that there's a mistake made in equating those two different kinds of accountability, but that they're both accountability and they're both part of what we're talking about here. And I think it's part of why it's helpful to frame this debate, because it can be, and it's the same thing for superheroes, for a superhero, the accountability conversation can range all the way from, like, do his buddies at the Justice League give him the cold shoulder for a little while, to are they locked up due to the Sokovia Accords,
Right.
And that there's all sorts of levels of what could or couldn't be accountable. So let me then ask the other question. Why is accountability important, do you think? First in general, but then also especially for superheroes.
I mean, people do some bad things. I mean that's a subjective judgment, but like people do things that harm other people. I'd say people do things that harm other, non-human animals and, the earth, like scorch the earth. And if there's no accountability, then maybe people are more inclined to do those things. Certainly they're more free to continue doing those things. Personally, I've been kind of investigating what with myself, like what I think actual accountability should be for things that, we call crimes, right? Like, You don't really commit a crime. You do a thing. And the law is written in a way that makes that a crime. And that might be a thing that, like, seems patently obvious to everybody, like, oh yeah, that is a bad thing, that should be a crime. But then there's other things that are like, well, we can have a pretty robust conversation about whether it should be. But in terms of like how we look at accountability, how we look at consequence, I think there are a lot of problems with it. And I mean, in all honesty, I haven't gotten to the bottom of, what we should do with certain people who...
You haven't figured out one of the fundamental questions of human nature yet? Come on, Paul, what are you doing?
All right. I've been I mean, it probably says something about me that I actually feel bad about this. But like, it's a thing I should have figured out by now. But I don't know, I've been reading a lot of prison abolitionist literature and like haven't gotten through the like study group course that I've assigned to myself. So there's some guilt there, but the truth is, like, this is a hard question, right? It's a question that humans have struggled with since, I would imagine, before civilization, right? Since you've had groups of people, which people have always existed in groups, like families at least, right? Like, how do you, what do you do when your kid does something that you don't think is good? What does a tribe do when a member of the tribe does something that is counter to how the rest of the members feel things should go? And how do we, as a giant, billions of people civilization, or groups of millions of people, sub-civilizations, whatever, like, how do we deal with these things? And it's a super hard question. Once people start having superpowers, it's just like, I guess super. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I think you actually got at the key, one of the biggest keys that we actually hadn't talked about for the first question, but should have, which is that I think a key part of accountability is the idea that you're part of a group to which you feel accountable.
Right.
You know, because that part of it's supposed to be like, you know, hey, Billy, like you're part of our network. You're part of our family. You're part of our community. Like I've read a lot of similar stuff, especially stuff about like how co-ops work and things like that. And often there's a sense of like you have made a commitment to a shared set of values. And so when you fall away from those values, someone else can call you out or call you in is probably in the better language of saying, hey, what you're doing isn't really within the values that we're supposed to be upholding. How can we like sort of, you know, get you to come back into that understanding? And if not, how do we deal with that?
Yeah.
I think one of the problems in our own society is that we don't really have that shared sense of community.
Well, we don't have a lot of voluntary association. I mean, that exists, right? But I'd rather say it another way. We have a lot of involuntary association.
Yeah.
And when that comes, it's like, I didn't sign a social contract. I haven't agreed. Like, this government does not have my consent, right? But it's implied by just like, the fact that I'm not like doing a revolution. And I think that's where a lot of this gets really difficult, is that if you don't have voluntary, like in a co-op, people join a co-op, right? And that's an act of will. And then it's very reasonable to say, okay, you should be bound by the rules of the co-op, and we work together to just, you know, figure out what those are. But when we have such a high level of involuntary association as we do in the real world, I think it becomes a little more fraught.
And so pulling it to the superhero discussion, I think that's actually another very good point, especially because, you know, like if you're because I think here's the other part of it is that there's one thing about the general accountability that all of us hold. But where I think it was important we started with the cop conversation is that if you have decided to voluntarily take on a role in which you are given more power because you have a higher level of responsibility, like a cop has the power to use violence in a way that I don't have as an individual citizen.
Right.
And I think a huge part of the problem is that the cops are now given way too much power and the racism behind all that and all of that. But even putting that aside, there then becomes a question of, if we give someone more power, to whom are they accountable? And I think that's where we really get into it with superheroes and the Avengers especially, because like no one chose these people to do that. You know, Captain America, he volunteered for a government program, but like, what'd you say?
I said besides Nick Fury.
Well, right. Okay.
But yeah, the people
but even
did not choose.
he goes against his accountability, as we'll discuss at a later point. Yeah. But, you know, Tony Stark saw a problem and made himself a vigilante and decided that he was going to go fix it. And he's pretty good at that in some ways. And then he tries to fix it in Ultron and does a really bad job.
Doesn't go so good.
So let's kind of talk about it specifically for how do you think having superpowers changes this discussion of accountability?
I don't think it does as much as people think it does, or as most people see. I don't think it changes it fundamentally.
Right.
I mean, so, you know, one thing that I'd start with is like, it's often seen as like these people with powers are sort of othered, right? And it's like, well, we get to decide what they do, or, you know, but if we look at the Avengers, okay, we've got, if we look at, say, the Avengers from the Avengers, right? And we can move on further from that. But to start with, you've got Tony Stark, who is just a guy, but has this, he's created, you know, outstanding futuristic tech that's, you know, made into weapons, basically, literally, that he then uses proactively, right, to go around and do certain things, like, you know, kill militia or whatever in whatever country has his weapons in it or whatever. So that happens in Iron Man, and, you know, there's not really a whole lot of accountability right there. Then you have Captain America, he volunteered, and so he was basically chosen. He was literally chosen, right, and imbued with this physical power by the government of the United States, by a secretive branch of the military. And exactly who signed off on that, I don't remember exactly how that worked. I think there was like a senator involved or something. But
Howard Stark probably was pulling a lot of strings somewhere.
He was definitely in there, right? So money had its influence.
And Captain America is an interesting example because he is, for the most part, accountable to the U.S. government from whom he takes orders. He does at one point violate those orders quite distinctly.
Right.
But he's
go ahead. I was just going to say up to a point, right? I'd say by the time we start talking about Ultron and Civil War, I think he's basically no longer doing that.
Once he wakes back up from the ice, I think he's no longer doing that for sure.
Well, no, I mean, he wakes up from the ice and, in the first Captain America movie, he violates orders. But, so we can kind of see that sort of spark of like, I'm going to do what I think is right no matter what, kind of no matter what anybody else says, right? But in in the Avengers and in Winter Soldier, he's at the beginning of Winter Soldier, he's a soldier basically for SHIELD, right? Or he's an agent of SHIELD. And then halfway through the movie, he's like, let's not do this part anymore. Yeah. And I'm calling the shots. He basically promotes himself to the head of his own team, right? So though I think, Captain America on some level should have more accountability. Because he was basically given his powers by an institution. On the other hand, Tony Stark has just way more power, right? In terms of actual raw power. And then if we want to go further in that direction, there's the Hulk, who's got just an insane amount of raw physical power that he gave himself by accident. And then we have Thor, who's literally, a god in Norse mythology who's an alien. And then it's like, then you're like, okay, well, what about are there like interplanetary treaties? Like how are you going to, should he be accountable to Asgard? The entire first
Thor movie, which I don't talk about often because I don't think it's very good. But that whole movie is about him being held accountable by the rules of Asgard.
Exactly. And then the other two characters are like basically agents of SHIELD, right? Black Widow and Hawkeye. So you look at that group and it's a very different group. And three of them are ostensibly working for the U.S. government in that movie. And then by Ultron, I'd say the six of them are kind of this independent force that it's like, yes, they're U.S. based, but they don't necessarily appear to be U.S. sanctioned anymore.
Right.
And I think it's a reasonable question, like, who should hold them accountable then? Like, should it be the U.S. government or should it be some international organization? And I think definitely an international organization makes more sense, except for the fact that the international organization is, at least in the context of the MCU, kind of a puppet organization to like the U.S. government is still going to have control of them, right?
Right.
So,
and I think there's a couple of things it brings up, especially because there's the question of what happens when you are allowing yourself to be held accountable to an organization that then winds up being awful, which definitely is the Captain America story, especially in Winter Soldier and other things. But even just backing up a second, I think another thing that you're getting at that's really important is, and I think I might even change the frame of my question, because I think you're right that it's not that having superpowers changes your being accountable. If you have superpowers and you just want to go be an accountant and a parent and live your life, then I don't think there's any higher level of accountability. I think maybe the better way I'm saying
the IRS, if you're
but I think maybe the better way of saying it is once you decide that if there's a problem in the world, either you yourself or you as part of a team are going to go fix it.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Superhero Ethics. We had a little bit of technical difficulty. Whoa, that was a word. We had a little bit of technical difficulty.
Indeed.
Paul seems to have this odd idea that he needs electrical power in order to record and get the internet. He had a blackout because, it's California. They do weird things like that. So
it's my entropy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just the thing.
It's a mage joke. So we fell off right in the middle of the conversation, but instead of wanting to we really thought the first 20 minutes of that were awesome, and we wanted to keep it. And now some of you are kind of like, wait, really? There was nothing
That's
good there.
what you guys think is awesome.
But anyway, the point being that instead of re-recording that and trying to go over that conversation, we wanted to just kind of jump back in. So for you, this sounds like it's 30 seconds later. It's actually about 12 hours later. It's currently 1:30 in the morning my time. So I'm currently a little bit punchy, which is great because when we started, Paul was a little bit punchy. Yeah. So I'm sure this is going to be just great.
Yeah, nice balance. A nice balance.
Exactly. But I think we can rally through because this is honestly... Somehow I thought this was not going to be much of a conversation, but we were maybe like 20 minutes in, and we were like, oh, we could do a whole series on this one topic. Because it's kind of at the heart and soul of everything we've been talking about on this podcast for the last couple of years. So with all that, let me jump back into the conversation. I'm going to try and make the point that I was making when we got cut off. Because we were talking about what does it mean to be accountable. And I was, what I was saying was that I think... just having powers doesn't make a person have to be more accountable than someone else. But the issue becomes once they decide that they're going to start trying to fix things. And fix things, all over the world. And often fix things for people who may not have asked them to fix things. And the example I was starting to use was, in the first Iron Man movie, Tony Stark finds out that the Nine Rings are doing these terrible things in Afghanistan and that they're using his weapons. And so he, in his Iron Man suit, flies over there, shoots a lot of people, and in theory, rescues everyone. As Becca Allen pointed out on our last episode, he doesn't actually try to, help the people, by offering money to rebuild or anything like that. But the point I was going for is, I don't remember him checking if he can enter Afghan airspace. I don't remember him checking with the U.S. government in any way, shape, or form on their military operations there. I don't remember him, basically doing anything to say, hey, is this something that would actually help? He just decides he knows what's best, and so therefore he's going to go at it. And I guess that was sort of the point I'm making is, you're right, it's not when someone has superpowers that they have to become accountable, but it's when they start saying, I'm going to use these powers to try and fix things, that now we need some kind of accountability in place.
Yeah, so... I think the more power somebody's trying to exercise, we all have power, right? Everyone has, and we all have varying levels of power based on a lot of factors. And these characters have, and in some cases, sort of absurd levels of power. But not necessarily, a lot of times that's more just absurd levels of physical power, right? But does Steve Rogers have more power than Jeff Bezos? I don't know.
All Captain America can do is punch people one at a time. Jeff Bezos can affect national policy.
Right. And so similarly, Tony Stark has more power than any individual soldier in the U.S. military, but does he have more power than the U.S. military? Maybe once he creates Ultron. Obviously, the U.S. military goes into a lot of places, and who are they accountable to? Any given military, really, right? The question, who are they accountable to their, to the people of that country? Is that country's government accountable to the United Nations? In theory, right? But how's that working out? It could be worse, but, we haven't had an all-out nuclear war on Earth yet. But, I guess sort of what I challenge is the idea that superheroes are somehow sort of this special case. It feels like that, right? But it's we have this massive issue with accountability in our own world, and superheroes, to me, are more of an obvious metaphor for that in a lot of ways.
Right. Well, I guess it's that I don't think that they need to be more accountable than, say, the army or the police.
Right.
But that they need to be that if they're acting in the function of the army or the police, which they often are, fighting bad guys, then they need to be as accountable as the army or police.
Right.
And
but
I would say as accountable as the army and police should be, not necessarily as they are in our own world anyway.
Yes. That's the really important phrase there, should be, right? Because in our world, I think those groups are absolutely not as accountable as they should be. They're definitely not as accountable as we'd like them to be. And so, I agree that I think but then the question is like, what does that accountability mean? What does it look like?
Right. I think that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I would say, though, also is that, like, there's a whole difference between, like, de jure and de facto. What is the fact on the ground versus what's the law? And I think with both police and army, as well as other things, like, no matter how well we do or don't think that those things are enforced, and I think we seem to agree that they're not enforced anywhere near as much as they are, there are at least official laws on the books. Like, cops have codes of conduct they're supposed to follow. Armies have rules of engagement they're supposed to follow.
Right.
Superheroes mostly don't have those things. They're kind of just figuring them out as they go.
Right.
And I think that's where, for me, a lot of the accountability conversation comes in as well, is that even that part is what's lacking.
Right. So, I mean, I think, like, there are laws on the books. Like, if a person goes and does a thing that would fall under the category of, like, what superheroes go and do, like, there's generally laws for that, right? Like, if you're walking down the street and somebody attacks someone else and you intervene, there are different places, there are going to be different laws for that.
Right.
And what those laws should be, that's a very, that can be a complicated question.
Right. But I think pretty clearly, like, those laws don't. They might, in theory, apply to superheroes, but they've never been applied.
Right, or rarely. Right. I mean, often the plot of a Batman is like, well, he can't just go around doing these things, like, and it's like, yeah, okay. But but in the context of Batman, or to bring it back to the Avengers, like, in the Avengers world, it's not like these government agencies are accountable in the way that we think they should be accountable, which is why then when we get into, Civil War and the question of, the Sokovia Accords, for me, it's like, well, if you had this sort of utopia isn't really the word, but like, an
idealized version of accountability.
Yeah, like the way that we think more or less like how it should happen, then something like that would make more sense. Whereas to me, within the actual context of the MCU, it's like, well, the U.S. government, the National Security Council, or whatever it is, like, they don't, those don't seem like institutions that are accountable to the people in any tangible way. And they don't seem like responsibility. Those aren't the people that I want, our heroes basically to be accountable to.
Yeah, and I think that's going to kind of be a key part of all this is, I think a lot of the question becomes, if we can't have the idealized version, do you, like, if you have to kind of fall one way or the other, is it worse to be too accountable to an individual or too accountable to a group? And I think that's the kind of question we're going to be wrestling with throughout this podcast. So let's actually go to the kind of the next part of this question of, like, if we agree at least that there's some need for some accountability, but, like, how that gets played out is the heart of this question. And we will, I promise, be getting into the Avengers directly pretty soon. But we just, there's so much to this debate. I think we really wanted to frame it. The next part is accountability to whom? Who do you think a hero who has chosen to kind of intervene in these things, who should they be accountable to?
I mean, so there's, like, within the context of the stories, and then there's, like, in an idealized world.
Right.
I'm going to go within the context of the stories. I think it often, I'm kind of taking a page out of your book, and, one of the things I really like about, superhero sort of teams, really, team up things or whatever, is that you often get some of the heroes holding the other heroes accountable and being like, wait, whoa, like, why are we doing this? I mean, there's a line in Ultron where Barton says to, I think it's his wife. I don't know if they're married or not. But anyway, he says to her, you don't think they need me? And she says, I think they do. And that's much scarier. Like, and, there's an extent to which he's sort of part of the, the conscience of the team. I mean, he, like, having a human who's, like, fairly normal, and I'd say it would be Natasha, except she's a little more assassin-y at that point in time. Yeah, I mean, once you get to, like, Endgame, it's kind of flipped, right? But At that point in time, there's an extent to which, Cap is supposed to be kind of the conscience of the team, and there's an extent to which he is, but, he has this power, and so having someone who's a little bit more of like, yeah, I've just got a bow and arrow, like, I'm going to kind of check you guys a little bit on like, what are you doing with all this power?
I think I often do like the team idea quite a bit. I've talked before about how it's part of why I like the Arrowverse so much on the WB. Wait, no, that channel.
WC?
What the hell's the name of that channel?
It's the WB, right?
WB, okay.
Yeah.
I remember UPN and like all WB.
Yeah, it's been called some things over the years.
Yeah. Wow, I just dated myself. But yeah, that and also even Justice League. Like so many of my favorite episodes are about like where one character is getting a little bit heated, and the others have to kind of rein them in a little bit. And I think to some extent that's what a lot of the Avengers when they're at their best are. And we'll talk about Ultron in a bit. I think it's a great example of how that functions specifically because Tony knows he can't go to the rest of the group because they will try to talk him out of Ultron.
Yeah.
I think that is one particularly good model, and I think that's a part of what it gets at is that I think there's kind of like two different levels of the accountability. One is how you make the decision, and then the other is who judges the consequences. Right. And I think a lot of it, I like that team aspect. I think the problem for me with it becomes kind of what you said, that why you need Cliff, that I feel like it's very easy for a group of the people who all do this to all start kind of backing each other up of like, oh yeah, no, of course you took the right chance. I would have done that too. Take a look at the cops. Like in theory, one of the ideas is that cops will hold each other accountable.
Yeah. How's that working out?
That don't work so well.
Yeah.
And with something like the Arrowverse, one thing they do is the idea that each of them comes from such a different background that they kind of do. I think that is one key area to be accountable. I think another key area though is to the people you're claiming to help.
Right.
I think, and part of this comes out of like a lot of my fears about white savior complex and things like that, and things that I think, certainly we've seen in our own world. Like, how many times has the United States been like, oh, we're going to go help the people of Vietnam or help the people of, Guatemala. And the people are like, no, could you not help so much, please? And I think that'd be an interesting question is, to the people in, the African country where Scarlet Witch wound up accidentally killing some folks. Like, she actually probably lessened the amount of killing, but how would they feel about it? Like,
right.
Who were they accountable to? I think there's, but because you're right, it's each one of the groups we could think of, has that problems. And of course, then there's also accountability to yourself. And this is, I think, really the Cap idea, is that you have to kind of set for yourself your own ideas, your own boundaries, your own limits. Batman to me is a great example of this, because Batman says, like, same with Daredevil, I will not kill. Now, we've talked about how we think there's kind of bad writing around, like, we won't kill, we'll just hit people in the head with metal pipes.
Right, yeah.
But at least they're holding themselves to that rule. I think there's a number of different ways a person can be accountable, and we can talk about kind of like which ones make the most sense.
Yeah, and I think you make well. First, I want to mention a couple corrections to ourselves. One, it's the CW. Right?
Oh, thank you. Okay, I was like, WB does not sound right.
Right, and it's Clint, not Cliff. I think I might have. I don't know who called him Cliff first, but let's just change his name anyway. I think you make a important point about the difference between accountability in a decision-making process and the difference between accountability in and holding accountable, right? In a what are the consequences for something. And I think in a decision-making process, it often is going to be more effective if it's a smaller team type thing. And then I think the consequences are going to be decided on by a community, hopefully a community that's, represented effectively and not, if you have a place and there's a monarch or a corporatocracy or any kind of oligarchy, it's like, well, often the government of that community. It's not representative of the people. It's representative of the rich people, basically, right? Like throughout human history, and that's kind of where a lot of my issue comes from with everything basically coming down to what the government says is right or okay. It's just that I don't think the government's been in the hands of the people, even in countries where it ostensibly is. And that's to varying degrees, right? But so, yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think I tweeted something years ago that basically, like, my only loyalty is to my own conscience, which is, like, basically pretty much in line with what Cap's saying in Civil War, where, although in the movie it's... Haley Atwell's character, right? It's Agent Carter who says this, but in the comic,
make like a tree and
exactly.
In the movie, it's Cap quoting her.
It's in the Carter. Movie, it's Sharon Carter quoting.
Oh no, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Sharon Carter quoting Agent Carter.
Right. But anyway, the point being that like that is something that I both firmly believe in. And also can completely understand how people can take that as license to just like do whatever they want. And the question is like, are you really asking yourself, is this what I should be doing? Is this a good thing to do? Or are you saying, this is what I want to do, and now I'm going to come up with an excuse for why it's a thing I'm going to do? And within the context of Civil War, like, Steve's basically like, yeah, I'm not just going to let them kill Bucky. And, like, I'm not going to just go and be part of this organization and let them tell me what to do, because the last organization I was part of was, like, horrible, right? And so...
And I think... Go ahead.
No, just it's difficult, right? It's like, how much do you trust yourself compared to how much do you trust other people? And in the movie, the reason I think like everybody's wrong is because they don't like take the time to sit down and have a conversation about it, right? Which obviously we've talked.
I've known people who are like, look, I'm on Team T'Challa, and I'm kind of like, yeah, that kind of makes some sense.
Yeah, I mean, except like in Civil War, he's mostly just like, I want vengeance, and like
by also not great,
right, and by the end of it, like he's all like wise and shit, but like,
I guess to me, here's the thing, and we're getting closer to the Civil War stuff, which is at the heart of all this, so it makes sense. Like when you say the whole thing about I trust my own conscience, and that's very much the Carter or the Cap idea of even if when everyone else thinks you're wrong, you say, I'm going to plant myself as a tree and say you move. And like Gandhi says something like that. There's some Gandhi quote about like hold your voice even when everyone else is telling you you're wrong.
Right.
And there, on one degree, I love that because I think there is so much of the power of the human conscience. The question I think though becomes how much should I trust your conscience? Especially, and there's two elements there. One is that I feel like one of the things that I think that I'm most afraid of, and I see certainly and I think I see in Cap and in Tony, but I see in our own like government and stuff like that, is when you get too far into that, like where's the moment where you say, wow, all these other people are against me. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm wrong. And I think that's where it gets the other part of it to me. And to me, this is the heart and soul of Civil War, is I think the reason why I am very wary of judging just by your own conscience is it's so very hard to know when you're acting out of your own conscience versus when you're letting, as you said, your emotions cloud you so that you feel like, actually, well, this is my conscience when it's really just like, what you want. And I think the best, Tony absolutely does that because Tony is so terrified of what he saw himself do in Ultron that he's like, Sokovia, you take all the power. I don't want this anymore. But I'd argue the flip side, Cap is so afraid of what he saw happen to S.H.I.E.L.D., which, for very good reasons.
Right. No.
That now he wants no one control. But the other thing is, how much is it also that, like, his best friend, who he thought was dead for 60 years, is now back, and he doesn't want to lose that person again. Like,
a lot, I think.
Do you think Cap would make the same decision if it was just a random guy who had been a Russian soldier and who maybe could now be saved?
So, yes and no. I think I don't know whether he would have gone after him in the same way, but what happened, I think they sort of threw down about the Accords before it came out, oh, by the way, this was Bucky.
Right.
I just watched the movie, so I really wish that I knew 100%. But I think he basically took a position and then...
I think you're right. No, that is right, because it's the signing of the Sokovia Accords is when the king of Wakanda is killed. So yeah,
for sure. So yeah, I mean, I think if it was some random, retired assassin who'd allegedly done it, I don't know if he would have then gone out of his way to the extent that he did, right? Which, you can have opinions about for sure. But I do think he basically was like, no, I'm not going to have this group telling me what to do or what not to do. Like, I'm not going to just sit on the sidelines because they say, oh, you can't go there. And like, but at the same time, it's like, I'm going to go there. And then if they arrest me, they arrest me, which to me is, that's sort of, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to then become a supervillain and like kill everybody who's trying to arrest me or whatever.
Which he though kind of then does.
I mean, I don't
when it becomes about people. Bucky.
Yeah, I mean, he fights people.
Right.
He's mostly chasing Bucky there at first, right? And then...
Right. I mean, he fucks up some German police officers pretty bad.
Right. Yeah, no, and I mean, that gets into the whole, like, not killing, but having ridiculous comic book violence that would, like, totally kill people in real life. Right. But yeah, so, I mean, we can think about Gandhi, or we can think about like Rosa Parks, or, people who are just like, no, I'm like, this is what the society is, what, the laws are telling me to do. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that because I think it's wrong. I don't think there were zero other people in their lives who were like, yeah, this is wrong. Right.
Oh, yeah. Well, and let me just jump in, though. Rosa Parks actually, I think, is an example of the kind of accountability to a community, but not the law.
Yeah.
Because she very much did not do that on her own. Right. She was a part of the local NAACP, and they had talked for a while about what would be the best. Like, they had really strategized and kind of come up with a plan that Rosa or someone else like her should, on the day they chose, like, not get up.
Right.
And I think that's a really interesting example, because that's one where they all decided that the law was wrong, and so they were not going to be accountable to the law, but they were going to be accountable to this group who all had this shared mission.
Right. And so, it's like Cap doesn't go off and just be like, I'm just going to be me, and I'm going to do whatever I want. Like, he's the leader of the secret Avengers, but he's like, I'm going to go off, and there's other people who agree with me,
Right.
Or, at the same time, it's like, do they specifically agree with him, or are they maybe more sort of like, I mean, like, Sam kind of is like, you call it, and whoever ends up shooting at you usually ends up shooting at me. But like, it doesn't seem like Sam's like, this is what we're going to do. Nearly as much as it seems like Rhodey is like, Rhodey's not like behind Tony on Team Tony. Like, it's almost like Team Rhodey as much as it is Team Tony.
Yeah, no, Rhodey is behind.
Maybe even more so, right? Like,
I think actually because the three of them represent three really interesting positions.
Yeah.
Tony and Cap, I think, are the perfect opposites because, Cap was part of a military organization for a long time, has seen how bad that can be, and doesn't want that anymore.
Right.
Tony has only been accountable to himself,
yeah.
Sees how bad that can be. Whereas Rhodey, he's like the only one who isn't shifted. He's part of an organization. He's accountable to them. Maybe probably because he's seen Tony, and he's like, I don't want to go where Tony is.
Right.
If I'm going to strap into this metal suit, I want to be accountable to some larger group. So he's very on board with, let's sign me up.
Yeah. And Sam also is ex-military and left. Things went quite sideways in his military career. And so he might have some sort of lingering bitterness, or it doesn't really feel like that so much, but it definitely feels like he doesn't have a just fully trusting the system. Everything's like great.
I mean, I got from Sam the idea that Sam feels like he's back in a military organization, and he has a general to whom he's accountable, and it's Cap.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, so it's like, it's a sub-team. It's a new team, basically, right? It's not like one guy just being like, I'm just going to do whatever I want. And so he still has some of that accountability, to the others. And then, that... I mean, because like basically he and Black Widow are running the Avengers when the incident with Wanda happens,
right?
And so it's like, to the extent to which it's like that's their fault or whatever. Like, to me, it seems like that's the sort of thing where there should be a trial, right? Like, it's like, let's have an investigation, let's have a trial. Like, if let the courts decide. I mean, as long as, the courts are reasonable and not some, horrible corrupt institution.
So let's use that actually to start jumping into some specific examples, and we'll definitely get to Scarlet Witch and Sokovia and Civil War. But starting actually at the beginning of the Avengers. Because to me, I think we actually brought up a number of interesting accountability issues during the Avengers. We can talk about a bunch of them, but to me, the specific one is Nick Fury.
Yeah.
Because in theory, Nick Fury is accountable to the Avengers Council. What is it called? The Shield Council.
I think it's like the World Security Council or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right. And he works for them, and in theory, the whole Avengers initiative is under their direction, which is also is as you said, like it's someone's running the show. But that's, I don't think the UN officially approved that by any means.
Exactly. Like 4 or 5 people on these like screens in a dark room. It's like, that's probably not representing the people of Earth in any kind of remotely democratic fashion.
Well, and so,
or even,
they make the decision to nuke New York, which I said on a different podcast, I'm not entirely thinking they're wrong. And that's, a whole other story there. But yeah, and then Nick just is like, nah, I trust my guys.
Yeah.
In doing so, Fury is, basically putting the lives of 8 million New Yorkers, if not the entire world, in his gut feeling about his people to win a war.
Well, he's putting the lives of the 8 million New Yorkers ahead of the risk of the rest of the world.
Right. Also very true.
I mean...
Yeah, it's the certain death of 8 million people with the much high... Yeah, like, exactly. And the math of it goes in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, I'm going to go on record as being against the nuking of New York, just for when we, clip the highlights, like that. Yeah.
That's fine. I'm not saying I'm totally in favor of it. I'm just saying that I feel like...
I get your point.
Yeah, I think that
it's
there's...
It's like 1,000 to 1.
Well, here's my larger point, and I do think it comes into the accountability thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that heroes will often do is say, I believe I can do this 1,000 to 1 chance.
Right.
And so I'm going to take this risk because I think we can do it.
Yeah.
And that the problem is that when they do that, they're often, who else are they putting at risk by doing that?
Right.
And that's the thing with the New York thing. But even so, yeah. So there, what do you think, who is Fury accountable to and who should he be accountable to?
I think at that moment, he's accountable to his own conscience. I think he's just like, no, you're not going to nuke New York with the plane off my ship for sure. And then he shoots one down and then another one's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll go instead. And I mean, he blows up one of his pilots too. He kills someone there, right?
No, I think you very clearly see the pilot. I think you see the pilot eject.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. That's very, comic book.
It's very prominent. I think specifically so you don't think he just
so you don't okay, yeah. Well, he certainly risked the pilot's life.
Yes, that's also very true.
They were in danger.
There's no Daredevil Batman way to blow up the plane.
Right, exactly. I mean, here's the thing. As part of the secret organization that supposedly doesn't even officially exist publicly. I think, although it's all kind of unclear, I think before the S.H.I.E.L.D. series and before the Winter Soldier, how much anybody in the world really knows that S.H.I.E.L.D. exists. It seems like it is this shadowy organization, and it seems like, well, but maybe it wasn't, but maybe it is. I mean, he's accountable to them, to the World Security Council, which apparently ends up being like, yeah, all right, we're good. We got the, staff and I mean, there's also like no like, oh yeah, the nuke totally would have sealed the portal and kept aliens from invading Earth.
There's so much there we don't know.
Right, like that was a Hail Mary in the first place, like trying to nuke New York.
I mean, in terms of accountability, I think it is. I think you're right. I think it does come down to what Nick's conscience should say, and I'm not thinking in that regard. I'm with you. I feel like because who the hell is this council? What do they know? What who do they represent?
Yeah, who are you to nuke New York? You know, like, I mean, if one of them lived there or something, then I'd be less against it. But if they're like, yeah, nuke me, we're good.
I could see maybe some folk like. To switch gears for a bit, but it's very connected to this. In the Superman movie, the level of the Zack Snyder one, Man of Steel, the level of destruction that was done to Metropolis was so gratuitous that it became actually a major plot point in the next movie, was how upset people were about it, and Batman specifically. Here's where I feel like, accountants and like number crunchers can like, make things difficult, to be sure.
Yeah.
But I do feel like, the Avengers didn't have any kind of like guidelines of, here's about the amount of collateral damage we're willing to be comfortable with, and here's maybe where you should draw the lines. And like, that's where I would kind of want some accountability, is some group coming along and saying like, okay, let's calculate the damage to New York City. Let's kind of review some footage and see like, maybe unleashing the Hulk was not the best plan, or like maybe it was necessary, but like those are the kind of things I think that I often think of when I think of accountability. Is like, granted, they're in the heat of the moment, they're just focusing on winning at all costs, but where's the ability to say, okay, but what are those costs, and are those costs what we should be paying, and can we adjust those in any way?
Right. I mean, it's you don't make laws for alien invasions before you have an alien invasion.
Also true.
So like that would be like the definition of. I think
that one's a mulligan. Right. We'll just like.
But I do think like, you at that point, then you're like, okay. Well, if this happens again, what's our plan? And that's one thing that actually is quite disappointing, I think, about the MCU. And like, I don't like super fault them for it or anything, but Tony's not wrong in Ultron, or like in Iron Man 3, he's basically got PTSD, I think, right, from having gone through a wormhole into space carrying a nuke and like. Fought off an alien invasion. Like that, I imagine would be traumatic. And what he wants to do, which is prepare Earth to be able to defend itself against a potential future alien invasion, seems like a worthwhile thing to do at that point in time.
Yeah.
We see a bunch of movies that happen after that, and there's some references in one to another, to each other. But, what are the stories like in that world? And we see this a little bit in, like, Jessica Jones or Daredevil or whatever, but not a lot. But, like, what are the stories in that world after aliens invaded New York? What are the conspiracy theories? Like, what percentage of Earth's population? Like, no, that was just the moon landing.
I think Daredevil does a great job of showing like the economics that happen in terms of the cleanup and like. But I mean, just the insurance. Like, what's the insurance industry like after something like that? But also, you're right. Like, what is the level of just worldwide panic and fear? And the TV show Watchmen, which is the comes after the movie. And the comic book
comes after the movie.
Oh yeah, the TV show that came out recently is set like 30 years after the comic book was set and the movie was set.
Yeah.
It's very, very good. I won't spoil anything, but like you've seen the original Watchmen, right?
I have.
Okay, have you read the comic book?
I have not.
Okay, do you mind if I spoil a thing from the comic book?
That's fine.
Okay.
I think I've read about it anyway.
In the comic book, instead of it being Dr. Manhattan who gets framed for the attack, Ozymandias literally, fakes an alien invasion. Or fakes an alien incident that causes millions of people.
Oh,
the idea being that then the United States and Russia will unite against them.
Right.
And one thing the TV show goes into is how there's now this, whole cottage industry of, people selling snake oil to protect you from, alien influence,
Right,
and, so many people are now, either, alien groupies or alien fears or, any of this stuff. And you're right. I would like to see the MCU have more of that, just how does the society change?
Yeah.
But pulling it back a bit, I think, and this is kind of a good way to segue into Avengers 2, Age of Ultron. You're right. I think where Tony starts from, of feeling like the world needs to be protected, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, Thanos is coming.
Yeah, Thanos is coming. And I think this is an odd connection I'm about to make, but I think it kind of tracks. I think he also feels like no one is listening. He has this kind of Cassandra moment of I have seen everyone else saw the invasion, but I actually saw the full fleet in a way no one else has done.
Yeah.
I get why this is so scary.
Yeah.
He kind of reminds me of some of the folks who, and here I'm very sympathetic to these folks as well as to him, who are the ones who are yelling and screaming most about climate change. Because they're they think, and I agree with them, there's this existential threat to humanity coming, and so much of the world is saying, maybe, but I don't want to lose my good car.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really quite surreal when you really think about what's going on Earth right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The petty squabbles of humans, basically, which, some of which are extremely serious. Right? And I don't mean to imply that they're not actually extremely serious on a person-to-person, interpersonal, many of these things are an individual's extinction. They're, a family's massive tragedy. They're a large group of people's horrific oppression. And meanwhile, though, the Earth is burning. We are destroying it as a species. And it's it's hardly mentioned when it comes to all the political things people want to talk about. It's an afterthought. And, the thing is, so many people are like, oh, yeah, it's really important, blah, 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 blah. I don't carry plastic bags to the store. I take my own bag. Okay. But, it's just not being dealt with in any real way. Because being dealt with would be this just massive change to the way we're living, right? And I feel
oh, good.
Oh, just to bring it back, what Tony sees is he's there are who knows how many different groups of aliens out there, right? And some of them want to come here and kill all of us or enslave us, right? It's unclear. And that, for everybody, most people are just after the attack, they're whoa, did you see this thing? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, oh, yeah, but did you see this new pair of shoes? It's people are just going to go back to their life and just keep living well, we're just going to face what's in front of us. And, they end up basically hilariously outgunned.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that's why, it makes sense to me where Tony's coming from. This and especially because I think even then he is starting to think what if I'm not enough? What if I can't do this? And I think because of that he's also sort of, you were saying this before. I think he's kind of recognizing that most of the superpowers they have are very good at 1-on-1 or maybe even 10-on-1 fights.
Yeah.
But Cap can't punch a planet. You know. Hawkeye can't fire arrows to destroy an army. He can fight a couple at a time. Yeah. Even the Hulk, as good as he is, can't he can't do those things. Captain Marvel maybe, but we don't know she's around yet.
Right, exactly. Yeah, she would have been really helpful during Infinity War.
Well, and so maybe that's actually a good question. Is Tony is doing exactly what you were talking about from Cap. Tony is saying, my conscience tells me this is what I need to do. I have found an answer. I think this works. So why is he wrong?
He's wrong because he knows he's wrong. Because he says it out loud. He's like, they're just going to tell us not to do this. Like, he's wrong because he never holds himself accountable to the people that he's, been fighting side by side with, who've seen maybe not exactly the same things he's seen, but who know what's out there, right? I mean, Thor especially, right? Like,
right.
Why does the scepter have to go back to Asgard in 3 days, right? Like, isn't that's, I think that was the plan?
I think so, yeah.
Like, talk to Thor, talk to Cap, he basically just bullies Bruce into helping him, and I don't think that he really, on some level, he thinks what he's doing is right? But I think he knows it's not the right way to go about it, but it's just the easiest way to go about it, and that's why he does it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly think Bruce, to me, is a great example of where accountability can be kind of like a fig leaf, because I think in his mind, he can tell people, no, I held myself accountable. I talked to Bruce Banner about it. Yeah. Because he knows that, as you said, he can bully Bruce into agreeing with him.
Yeah, he sought out the one guy who he knew wouldn't actually stand up to him on it.
I guess here's why I raise the question, is because, for me, I feel like Cap could have done a lot of those same things. Like, Cap could have gone to the rest of the team and said, well, what do you think about the Sokovia Accords? And he did, and most of them were against him. And I think Cap is braver about it, but I feel like Tony is also acting out of his own conscience. And here's, I guess, maybe the heart and soul of the question. Acting out of your own conscience works if you're as good a person as Cap is.
Yeah.
It does not work if you're as bad a person. Tony's still a decent person. If you're as flawed a person as Tony is.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, do you set the rule assuming everyone's a Cap, or assuming and therefore, like, taking the risk of a Tony, make the wrong choice? Or do you set the rule of assume everyone's a Tony and take the risk of someone like a Cap being more limited than he should be?
I mean, I think each person sets the rule for themselves, and it takes a level of self-awareness, and which, I recognize most people don't have. I mean, I guess I've spent my whole life kind of feeling like, certainly not like a Captain America, but like, I've spent, since I was 5, basically, I've spent my entire life feeling like I'm right about a thing. Almost everybody else is wrong about that thing. It really, is excruciating when I spend time thinking about it and thinking about the level of suffering that exists in the world because of that. And, it's not like I'm never willing to question myself.
Right. And to be clear, you're talking about being a vegetarian and then later a vegan.
Yeah, and more broadly, maybe just the way humans treat non-human animals, right? Yeah. Like, if people decide, like, in certain cultures or in certain circumstances, whatever, it's not like I'm judging every individual action that most people make. It's particularly the way you look at it in the world as it is today, Right. And so, I do think, but, meanwhile, I have a car that runs on gas, and I know that that's bad. Right.
And I guess that's the thing, is I think kind of what you were saying about each person decides it for themselves. The problem to me is I think we have such a low level of self-awareness that I think, when the rule is every person gets to decide for themselves, you get the people who say, I've read the statistics, I've read the science, I don't think I need to wear a mask.
Right. Yeah. So, ultimately what I mean is every person does decide for themselves, and then the law is what it is.
Right.
And it holds people accountable to the extent that it does. I think having some sort of laws that would hold people accountable for doing the things that superheroes do makes sense. Right? Yeah. I do think that makes sense. I think that the Sokovia Accords, as they were drawn or as they were presented to us in Civil War, don't achieve that goal in an effective fashion. Yeah. But when we were doing the 100th podcast, I was like, Tony's right to be on Team Tony. He gains that self-awareness. Right. I think through Ultron, right? maybe he overreacts in that direction. But I don't think he's wrong to say, yes, somebody should be there. I should have some oversight over me, right? He's correct. Meanwhile, I think Cap is also right, like that he should have some people he talks to and listens to. But, like, I don't think he needs someone telling him, like, don't go make a murder bot. You know, that said, he does make, I think, a pretty horrible decision in
Infinity War?
Yes.
Yeah. The whole you don't trade lives thing. Yeah.
Right. That, which, it's like, ultimately, that's like, that should have been Vision's decision. And, you know, they do come around to, like, well, you know, maybe there is a way to actually, you know, take it out and blah, 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 and only a few thousand Wakandans will have to die.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the worst parts to me, is that he does trade lives.
That's 100% the worst part.
The lives of people who aren't his friends and are darker skinned.
Right, exactly. And that's extremely problematic.
Right.
Like, if they could have gotten, you know, if they could have done that, I don't know, somewhere else, you know?
Yeah. Well, especially because, like, you say, like, well, okay, but King T'Challa, he takes that accountability, but he's a king. He's not elected. And granted, the idea is that in that culture, like, the people all love him and he is accountable to them. But pulling it back to Ultron, though, and on this subject, though, of, like, as you said, the laws should apply. So what should happen to Tony for Ultron? Because I feel like if there were any sort of human law that applied here, one of two things should have happened. Either A, there's a huge argument to be made that he has committed some kind of, like, that the deaths of the people of Sokovia can be blamed on him, whether it's, criminal indifference to human life, or, negligent homicide, or something. I mean, there's a lot of ways to put him in jail, but if nothing else, like, you think some people could bring a lawsuit?
Yes. Yes, I do. I think basically he should just give all of his money to Sokovia. He should get one suit and, like...
Yeah, I mean...
I think Sokovia should be able to tell Tony what he has to do for the rest of his... No. Totally. I mean, so first of all, there probably isn't a whole lot of, like, legislation or international treaties on, like, what happens when someone builds a murder bot. Right. You know, that said, there are probably some other laws that, you know, can be... brought to bear. And I do think, certainly from a civil standpoint, like, yeah, there's some liability going on there. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of those people are dead. Obviously, they left some people behind, like Baron Zemo. But yeah, it's like, what is the fallout after that? Like, it should be some very substantial consequences, you know? And since it was basically Tony who did that, like, and, you know, and similarly, like, I mean, as we've already said, in Civil War, there should have been some consequences or there should have at least been an investigation to, like, okay, what happened here when this thing blew up? It's like Scarlet Witch didn't blow up a building. She moved a grenade that someone...
Well, so let's get into that exactly. Yeah, like, so in Civil War, you know, they're in this situation, and Scarlet Witch makes an instantaneous combat decision. Right. And I think one of the things that's interesting is that with a lot of situations now, both with the police and with the military, because we had a lot of cases where soldiers made instantaneous combat decisions, and sometimes they were thought to be right, and sometimes a lot of people thought they were a horrible decision. You know, the question is, like, what are you supposed to do in that situation? And so, yeah, so what do you think of what Scarlet Witch does, and what should have maybe happened to her?
I think what she does in that instance is, like, fine. It seems to make sense. Like, basically, somebody has an explosive device that they're letting loose in a crowded area, and she uses her powers to try to take it away from that crowded area. And, you know, she accidentally puts it somewhere that is also crowded. So exactly what should happen to that? After that, it's like, so just in terms of what she did seems reasonable to me. Obviously with tragic outcome, right? But, like, sometimes I mean, what if she just kicked the grenade, right, away from the people, but then some other people.
Remember, it wasn't a grenade. It was skull bones with a crossbones.
Crossing bones.
Yeah, it was like this actual like a person, a very large person who had a whole bunch of like explosive, strapped to his chest.
Right. Okay. So some sort of explosive.
Right.
So yeah, what if some, I don't know, big person like grabbed him and threw him away from a crowd, but then into another crowd? It's
right.
like, it's a little bit like the trolley problem, except like you don't know how many people are on the other track, right? It's like if it's a dark tunnel and you're like, oh, let's turn the trolley down this other dark tunnel instead of running over those 3 people. Oh shit, there were 11 people in that dark tunnel. Right. Like, what are the consequences for that? I don't know. I think you have to interview the witnesses. You have to see what really happened. Like, what would the the outcome have been here? What would it? Right. What was
there a better option that she didn't see in the moment?
Right. And then do you hold her liable for that? Do you hold Cap liable for that, which I think is maybe more reasonable? Yeah. Do you hold the United States accountable for that because they're quote unquote U.S. based? I mean, that's where they're physically located. Right. She's Sokovian, right?
Yeah.
So, it's complicated, basically. But like, yeah, there should be an investigation into that. And if it's found that like it was criminally negligent, then, you can have lawsuits, you can have trials. That all seems quite like a reasonable consequence.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. And I think that's actually where I would start to get to the kind of accountability that I would want for a group like the Avengers. Because, and again, here we're talking about what the military and police should do, and they don't always by any means. And in some weird ways, the military has gotten better at this than a lot of police have, which is not a sentence I thought I would say 10 years ago. And certainly by no means, like, there's still some terrible things the U.S. military is doing in parts of the world. But, like, you mentioned it's the trolley problem, and there's an extent to which no one person should have to have this like intense philosophical like reasoning to figure out the most ethical choice to make in this life or death instantaneous moment.
Right.
But so the point then is supposed to be that an organization like the police or the army is supposed to say, here's our answer to the trolley problem. Here's what we want you as soldiers to do in order to, these are like the decision trees to minimize the risk and to reduce the amount of collateral damage as much as possible while doing what you have to do. And now we're going to train you very rigidly to be able to make those decisions on an instantaneous basis. And then the public should be able to say, like, okay, well, how is that training working? And is that a problem? And one of the things I think we've seen with the police, actually, is that one of the most effective things that's been done to reduce police violence is looking at how a lot of the way those cops are trained is often very it's unintentionally or maybe intentionally, but mostly subconsciously, but it's instilling racist ideas, and so it's helping put cops more into the mindset of like a black body pops up, that's more of a threat,
Right.
And so there's been a public accounting, and the public is able to sort of talk to cops and being like, hey, you really need to change some of these things. And sometimes in some cities it's happened. I think when I talk about accountability for the Avengers, that's the kind of thing that I would want more than anything. I'd want to know, okay, if the Avengers are officially sanctioned, or even if they're not, like, what are the training protocols? How is someone like Scarlet Witch being trained in terms of what is acceptable and what is not? Because I think I agree with you. I feel like if anyone is really to be held accountable here, maybe it's Cap or Black Widow or both of them. Because the question is either A, how was she trained, or because I think they say this is her like second day in the field or something like that. So maybe the other question is like, was she ready to go in the field? If a rookie cop makes a terrible mistake, almost no one's ever punished, but sometimes what'll happen is that their training officer is also punished. Of like, they weren't ready to go out in the field with a gun. So what would your kind of feeling on that be? If it was something of a like, okay, you Avengers are going to do your own thing. We're not going to try and like point you, but we're going to say like, you need to publish like what your training standards are, and you need to let others like through the government or through someone else like have some input into how do you decide what's acceptable collateral damage. And when one of you does that, there gets to be a public hearing, and we get to hold you accountable and maybe put you in front of a court of law. That's the kind of oversight you would be okay with?
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, that's the kind that I think makes sense. And, you know, like what it, actually in practice was, I don't know. But yeah, I definitely think there's, I think in the United States, cops have, we can criticize what the training is, but also just if you look at the length of training compared to most other countries, it's ridiculously short. I get the same feeling with Wanda, I mean, she was in the field, on day one, right? Like against Ultron, but then they, I think, did some training later, and maybe there weren't a whole bunch of things going on for a while, and now this is like her first mission after that, or maybe second, or whatever. And I think we can definitely criticize, say, well, it seems like maybe she wasn't trained enough, the tricky thing though, so in terms of like what you're saying, like, what sort of situations, what types of actions, what kind of trade-offs, collateral damage, your how you want to handle that, how you want to approach it. I think that's very reasonable. In terms of like having a manual for how we're going to train someone who has Scarlet Witch's powers, which nobody else has ever had before.
Yeah. And also to face threats that often the threat would be the first time we've ever faced that threat before.
Exactly. And that's sort of one of the reasons that I think with, stuff like this, there is a little bit of a kind of like, throw your hands up and be like, you just have to do the best you can.
Yeah. And
that's just the best that you're going to be able to do. And you can train and train and train, and that's going to help. But ultimately, it's not the same as if we're looking at training cops or training military, where, yes, every situation is its own situation, right? Context always matters. But, like, you know basically the range of, like, earthly weapons that a person might wield. You know, that if you're in physical conflict with someone, like, they're not going to phase shift through you. Like, there are laws of reality that are fairly well understood, I think, that limit sort of the scope of situations that a real life, police or military are going to face. Whereas in comic books, it's like every villain has some new thing, basically. And so in that sort of world where that's a thing, I think there's a little bit of there has to be somewhat of an acknowledgement of, like, this is hard. Some of these threats we have no other way of really addressing, although theoretically, like, maybe they should by now, right? And, like, whoever can address them is going to do the best they can. And if they do something that we think is really unconscionable, we're going to hold them accountable for it.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it. And I think this is where it's funny. A lot of people, when I ask them if they want to come on the podcast, they always wonder, like, do you have to be an expert in ethics? And it's like, no, we don't actually ever talk about ethics academically. I'm going to very briefly here because, and although everything I'm saying I got out of my ethics education, but you can also get from a couple episodes of The Good Place, frankly, which is a really, really good show. And with I had a fantastic ethics professor. But The Good Place is also a fantastic ethical education.
You learned this in school. I learned it from Chidi.
Yeah, I mean, but Chidi's a great teacher too.
Right.
But my point of this being that there are, there's a number of different ethical schools, but two of the kind of like at the polar opposites are, one is Kantian ethics, which comes from Immanuel Kant, which is the idea that you can set a rule for every situation, and
well, that can't be right.
Yeah. Boo. You're not even a dad.
Boo hiss, thumbs down.
But at the other end of the spectrum is what the school of ethics that I probably fall into most, which is virtue ethics, which is the idea of you try and decide what are the virtues that you believe in, and then you're constantly asking yourself, in this new situation, am I still living out those virtues? Whether it's a dedication to, like, the preservation of all life, or, like, honesty above all, or growth and prosperity. I mean, it can be a number of different things. And I think, to me, that's kind of what I'd want to see with the and also that there's actually a whole other set of accountability we never mentioned, which is not accountability towards any person, but it's accountability towards a set of principles or to a set of rules.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of if I think if there's anything that I would see would done, it would be something like that, where it's okay, we can't give you, like, destroying 4 buildings is okay, but destroying 5 buildings is not. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But there's an idea of, like, okay, so if, as a general principle, if the choice is to stop the bad guy while killing a lot of innocent life versus, like, letting the bad guy escape to preserve innocent life, like, where should you generally fall down? Like, what even that is probably maybe too specific. But, you set, like, what are the values, and then how can we hold Scarlet Witch and Cap and all of them accountable to those values?
Yeah, right, I like that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's move on to another. We're getting to the big one, but the second one I want to ask is, who should be responsible for Bucky? Like, because I think one of the things that throws me somewhat about it is so much of what Cap is doing is putting utter and total trust in Bucky, and that Bucky can't be turned again. Which, and again, I'm trying to remember the exact order of the movie, but I think isn't he then proven, like, isn't it after Cap has fought to protect Bucky that Zemo, like, reactivates Bucky again?
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, the thing happens in the beginning in Lagos in Nigeria, right? Scarlet Witch,
right,
blows up a building with crossbones. Then the Sokovia Accords are put on the table. Cap's like, no, I'm not signing them. Then Zemo bombs the summit, right? T'Chaka is killed, right? And then Bucky is framed, and then everybody's going after Bucky, basically, right? Steve gets to him, T'Challa gets to him, and then ultimately the, like, Berlin police or whatever get to all of them. And then Bucky's in this thing, and Zemo's impersonating the psychiatrist, I guess, who's supposed to talk to him and interview him, and then he reactivates him then.
Right, that's right.
And I'm not sure that Cap makes the argument like he can't possibly be reactivated, but he makes the argument like that's not him. Like Bucky's in there, basically, I think. Right. But then Bucky does go on a tear of destruction. But then Cap basically captures him and he and Sam are like, what are we going to do? And then they find out about the other thing, right? And they're like, oh, well, we have to go there to stop it, basically.
Which turns out is all a trap by Zemo anyway.
Exactly. Which is very clever and was actually quite a relief watching the movie. It was like, oh, we don't have to deal with 4 more super soldiers. Like, I felt like that was going to be a bit excessive and like this totally thing that was kind of off theme.
I thought so too, especially because I had a fear that Cap and Tony, that it was going to be it was going to be what Batman and Superman did, which I think came later, but was still one of the reasons I don't like that movie. Because instead it would be like, okay, well, whatever your fight is, let's stop thinking about it. We never have to resolve it because, well, A, because your mothers have the same name, but also because now there's this bigger threat you have to fight together.
Right. Like, oh, you love a Peggy? I love a Pepper. They both start with P. Let's be bros again.
Oh, God. That'd be terrible. Peggy. I kept not being able to remember Agent Carter's
Me either. I just came up with it. It's quite embarrassing.
I was like, I wonder why you dropped it. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, so and again, I think that's another one of the times where I feel like, and actually I think an even better example of this is Jessica Jones, where in season 2 of that show, I think it's season 2,
yes,
Jessica's mother is basically like going to be really horribly treated by the legal system, and so Jessica frees her, like helps free her, and she then goes on to kill more people. Like, I think that's another kind of accountability, is sort of like when you sort of defend someone and say like, no, I think this person's like okay, like we shouldn't be locking them up. Like, to what extent are you now accountable for what they do?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Mike Big D is responsible for Worm, right? He says.
It's a Rounders reference for anyone who hasn't seen one of the best poker movies of all time.
When you vouch for someone, basically, or when you literally free them from captivity, like. Yeah, I mean, there's a large extent to which what they do from that point is on you. Yeah. It's on you, and it's still on them also, right? Unless they asked to be incarcerated and then you freed them against their will, however much sense that makes, which I guess that's a thing. So yeah, I mean, I think Bucky's rampage there in getting out of that facility, like I think that's on Cap. And if Bucky then went around doing a whole bunch of more bad things, like that's on Cap for sure. And I don't think he would disagree, and I think that is. I think you do take responsibility. Similarly, when you train Scarlet Witch, what she does is on you, at least in the beginning, right? Like, years down the line, like if, they've done a bunch of their own training, they've moved on, they've done something else, like, well, now that's on them,
Right. But while they're a Padawan, you're still responsible for them.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to make an Obi-Wan reference also, but
yeah,
I managed to avoid it because I'd already given it to the Rounders reference.
That's fair. All right, so let's get to the main kind of place where this accountability question's up, and I think we've both kind of staked out our sides, but maybe just kind of like make it super clear. Like Team Cap, make your argument.
The Sokovia Awards, the Sokovia Accords don't make sense because they would have people held accountable specifically because they have, because they're different from other people, and they'd be accountable to an agency that is not representative of the people who they say they are representative to.
Right.
Basically. If they were purely representative and the Sokovia Accords were more of a broader international treaty about, people trying to stop this or that kind of things have to abide by certain regulations, I'm on board with that.
Okay.
But I think, locally within the Civil War, I wouldn't sign them.
Right. So you don't think that some kind of accountability that goes beyond Cap and his conscience, that some kind of accountability there would be bad. It's just that this kind of accountability is wrong.
Yes.
Okay.
I think the details always matter.
Right.
And in this case, the details make me say, no, pass.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. And I think here a lot of it gets down to the frustration that I think we've both expressed about the movie, and that a lot of folks have, where it's just like, why did the conversation have to end? Generally a negotiation isn't, I make an offer, you make a counteroffer, I reject your counteroffer, we start punching each other.
Right.
Because I mean,
the other thing, though, here is there's no negotiation. It's an ultimatum.
Right.
Right, which is another thing I have a problem with.
Yeah. And I think that is fair. And I think that in some ways, and maybe it's because it's more of an ultimatum than I see, I think, for me, I don't hear Cap make the acknowledgement that you just made. I don't hear him ever say, yeah, I would be okay with some kind of oversight, but not this.
Right. And
maybe I'm remembering wrong, and if a listener wants to write in and tell me, please let me know. And I think this is where where my fear about him all comes is that speech, the granted Sharon Carter gives, quoting her aunt. But that idea of when you think you're right and everyone else thinks you're wrong, you just kind of plant yourself. And it's because, and here the fact that Captain America represents America isn't lost on me. Yeah. I think I've seen so much damage be done in the world by people who thought, we know what's best for others, we know what's right, we're going to, do it no matter who the hell thinks we're wrong. And I don't think Cap would ever do this, but that can so easily start becoming a idea of now, if you think I'm wrong, then you're actually hurting the mission, and so now you're a danger too.
Right.
And it's the sort of thing where it's, this kind of goes to what I was saying to you before, of do you make a law based on who Cap is, or do you make a law based on who Tony is? I am, my mother had a saying, I think it's a common legal expression, but that exceptions make bad law. And I think you're right. I think Cap doesn't need the Sokovia Accords. Cap's, even though he's affected by some of the things he's gone through emotionally, I think that you need more of a rule. You can't base the rule based on thinking everyone's going to be like Cap, And
yeah,
I'm with you that Sokovia Accords were garbage, and I wish there had been some level of some rule is needed, not this one. Let's talk about it more. And I think even when I come down to it, I'm like 55-45. It's still so close to me. But I think I'm on the side of like a bad accountability that can be fixed in the future is still better than no, because at least then you're acknowledging the need for accountability.
I was so close. No. So I will acknowledge that I do think it's bad that Cap doesn't ever acknowledge or seem to entertain the idea that he needs any kind of oversight and doesn't really mention accountability.
Right.
I'd say a lot of this is more issues with the writing, which I think is great, but it's trying to frame. I mean, one thing that I think the MCU has done, particularly the Avengers movies and the sort of, the Captain America and Tony Stark arcs, is they've introduced like some really serious ethical debates into hardcore action movies, right? That are like comedies. They're kind of like action comedies, really. Because there's always a lot of levity in basically any MCU film. And there's always a lot of action, or there's almost always a lot of action. Maybe there's a couple movies that don't have that much. But I think it's really hard to do that and like still have time to like really dig in as much as we would like, right? Like, how about a series about, the Civil War? And so, I mean, I think we agree that there should be some sort of accountability. We agree that the accountability as presented in the movie is not great. You tend to go on the side of like, well, a shitty accountability is better than no accountability at all. I'm not even necessarily saying like within the MCU, like the Sokovia Accords, like there should probably be something like that going on. My main point where I'm basically planting like a tree is like, I think Cap is right not to sign them himself. You could make an argument that he could be like, okay, I'm going to sign them and then just kind of like ignore them and like do my thing anyway. Yeah. Right. But like, that's so not him, you know? Like he'd rather be an outlaw doing what he thinks is right than be like pretending to, like Black Widow basically did that. Right. Yeah. Like she signed the Sokovia Accords. She's like, yeah, they want us to do this. This is what we have to do right now. We're going to say we're going to do what they're going to tell us to do. And then at whatever point in time, I'm like, nah, I don't think this is the right thing to do. She's just going to flip. And she did. Yeah.
In that regard, I think...
Which makes perfect sense for her, too.
And I think it makes sense for her. I think I do respect Cap's position more than hers. Because you're right.
It has more integrity, right? Yeah. Although you could say hers has integrity within her view of the world, I'd say. Just her view of the world maybe is a little further away from ours. But
let me ask you this. So, I don't think this is a perfect analogy to what you're talking about, but I wonder, I feel like your answer to this will help me better understand what you're saying about Cap. If you are the best driver in the world, and you are 100% confident, and probably everyone else agrees, that you are never in your life going to get in a traffic accident, should you wear a seatbelt? Should the seatbelt law apply to you?
Well, in terms of seatbelt law, I'm not. Yeah, so I'm like kind of mixed on seatbelt laws, but
okay, that's fair.
Like just like from a philosophical standpoint, like it falls under the category of things that like, I mean, to not get in a huge like tangent about like mask wearing and stay at home like orders or laws or regulations. Like I'd say philosophically, I'm kind of 50-50 or 55-45 on whether or not the government should actually, I don't think it should order people to stay at home. I actually really don't think that's okay. I absolutely think that it should not allow businesses to be open beyond those that are necessary. And I absolutely think that, insisting people wear a mask indoors around other people. But those are things that, so to not get too deep down that rabbit hole, the point I wanted to make was like, there are things that there are laws about that are like, you should do this. And
is it different in the danger to yourself versus the danger to others?
Yes, that's not my point, but
okay.
It's a good point. The point I want to make is that there are a lot of laws that I think are kind of stupid,
Mm-hmm.
or rather that I don't think should be a law. I don't think the state should threaten force or financial penalty or whatever if someone doesn't comply with it. But that I think like getting upset about is just really dumb also, because it's like, just do it. You know, it's like there's not. It's like, why? What? Like just wear the seatbelt. Like it's just not a big deal unless like you have some. I mean, I had a thing with my appendix where actually wearing a seatbelt was very uncomfortable, and driving long distances aggravated it. And I think that might have possibly even been part of like where the issue came from in the first place. Probably not, but like maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was a perfect like, I do think like, yeah, it would have been reasonable for me to say, yeah, I'm not going to wear a seatbelt, unless we had like socialized medicine like properly, and then it's like, okay, well now if I'm risking myself, then other people are going to have to pay for it. Like, yeah, I think if you're the best driver in the world, like, and I mean, the thing is, it's like there are factors outside your control, right? But if somehow like, that you're never going to get into a car accident because you have like some magical ability or something, like, I don't think anybody should give you a hard time for not wearing a seatbelt. Like, I don't think, like, but at the same time, it's like, you can just wear the seatbelt and it's like not a big deal.
Yeah.
Unless you have an appendix thing.
I see where you're coming from. And I think it kind of comes down to the kind of the core philosophical difference I think we have, which is like, this is odd because I feel like in general I'm the much more idealistic one of the two of us, but in this I'm a lot more cynical. In that, because idealistically I agree with everything you've just said.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it again comes down to the heart of the kind of the Cap versus Tony idea, which is that for me, and it goes back to actually what we were saying at the beginning of this podcast, which for our listeners was maybe an hour ago, for us was 12 hours ago.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it was more like...
It was about an hour and 40. It was about 12 hours ago for our listeners, too.
Yeah, okay. Our podcast hasn't gone... That episode hasn't gone that long. No. But, no, and I got confused by that. But yeah, we were talking about how, like, ideally, like, we're part of communities, and our communities call us in, and that, like, ideally we don't need we don't need a rule, because it's like, hey, Betty, like, you're part of this community, you love your neighbors, you support your neighbors, you going out of your house right now is putting your neighbors at risk. You really shouldn't do that. And Betty's like, you're right, I believe in these things, I shouldn't do that. And I think this is a lot of the kind of like libertarian idea, is that if we didn't have government, we would, I'm sorry, the libertarian idea is that we don't need government because people just do those things on their own. I kind of feel like the pandemic is the best argument against libertarianism that's ever happened in the world. But even putting that part aside, to me, laws are an imperfect solution for imperfect scenarios, and like, yeah, I don't think we should have a need for laws like seatbelts, and there's even some like personally, I feel like if you want to destroy your life on heroin, then I feel like that is your legal right, and I don't think that should be criminalized. Yeah. I think you should then be 100, like, you should never have any chance to be like to me, I would say if you completely legalize drugs, but then also allowed any employer who ever wanted to do drug tests whenever they wanted, I would be totally okay with that. Because then it's saying, like, you're always welcome to do drugs, but, like, people are willing to say, like, you're on drugs, you're not safe. Like, we can't have you do this thing. And because that's...
Any employer, or, like, employers where you're, like, operating heavy machinery or interacting with people in a way where you could cause harm?
I guess, yeah, probably that. Because the other one, the idea should be, like, if you do badly at your job, it's not actually, like, there's no danger. You're just going to screw up your job, and then someone can fire you. Because certainly, I know many people who are... I said the thing about drug testing and then immediately took it back in my head, because, like, I know people who are stoned 24/7 and are perfectly capable at doing jobs that don't require fine motor skills.
Right. They shouldn't be, like, a forklift operator while they're doing that. But, like, if they're if they're working in front of a computer, it's like, come on.
I also know people who are stoned a few hours a day, and it ruins them. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's true for anybody.
Sure, of course.
But the point of all this being, like, I do agree with the idea of, like, cutting down on victimless crimes, or even if like you yourself are the victim. Like I've always thought that suicide being illegal is the dumbest thing in the world. Especially because what that now means is like if you are saved from suicide, you can now be like criminally liable.
Right.
But the point of all that being like, I think there's a lot of laws that I would love to move us towards a society. I would love to be in a society where most people said, you know what? I don't need a gun. I don't need a handgun. That's a dumb thing for me to own. It's not helpful for me. We don't live in that world, and so I think we need laws to help move us towards that. And tying it all back to this, now that I've offended truckers, people who use drugs, people who don't use drugs, and gun lovers, I've offended all those people, and I apologize. Well, not really, but you know what I mean. Bringing it back to the actual connection here, though, I think that's the thing, is that I feel like you're right. Cap doesn't need oversight. Cap probably I don't think there is anyone on this planet who has a better idea of what should or shouldn't the Avengers be doing than Cap. But I don't know how to write a law that says everybody but Cap needs this oversight. And I guess that's the thing. But yeah, I think especially from this conversation, we're actually a lot closer than we've thought we were before. In part because I think we're both listening to each other and hearing each other, and that's like, conversation does good things.
Yeah, it's almost like conversation and discussion can be productive.
So given all that, let's turn to the last segment where we get to just sort of like throw all this out and write for ourselves. What do you think the perfect Sokovia Accords would be? If we could write the Sokovia Accords, if we could write, here's the rules of accountability that the Avengers and then also like the Defenders and other people in the Marvel Universe have to follow, what would they be?
So just to summarize, we're going to do this as the wrap-up question.
It'll just be like 5 or 10 minutes, right?
Okay. So I think this is the sort of thing that would take years to draft properly.
Yep.
I'm going to start with that. I think that they would not apply specifically to quote-unquote enhanced people. Mm-hmm. They would be broader and basically apply to, anyone who essentially wanted to intercede on their own in some sort of a conflict. And I do think that something like that would be great to be able to come to some sort of international understanding.
Right.
I mean, we have the Geneva Conventions, right? But countries don't really follow them all the way. I mean, so...
Well, Yeah. What if it was, though, because maybe we're having a little, to maybe focus it a little more, and although maybe you would reject even this premise, what if it was, look, we have the general laws about vigilantism and getting involved, and those rules apply to everybody. If you are superpowered and you want to help, you can be part of this sort of like, not official government organization, but a government-recognized organization in which you are able to use your superpowers to try and help with specific training and oversight, and like, here's what that would look like.
Yeah, so if that's some sort of an organization that you can voluntarily join, and that doesn't necessarily mean like you can never use your powers in any circumstance outside of that, but that sort of maybe almost like grants you a level of kind of what Tony's looking for, right? Gives you a level of support, a level of oversight, and a level of what's the word? The thing that they want to give to businesses when things open so they don't get sued.
Liability protection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, not total liability protection, but sort of
insurance.
A layer.
Malpractice
exactly. Insurance. Yeah, basically like, look, I'm a sanctioned, defender or whatever it is, Avenger. And what I'm doing is sanctioned by, the governments of the people of, Earth or whatever. And what the Avengers end up doing in Endgame goes way beyond Earth, right? They're trying to restore half the population of all the planets. So the things to me that are necessary for something like that to really be effective and a purely positive thing, you would need the people drafting it, and then the people in control of the organization or the oversight body, whatever it was. You would need those people to actually be representative of who they say they are representing. And that's like, so, okay. So to back up just the like libertarian kind of thing, like I sometimes call myself a like lowercase l libertarian, like leftist libertarian. Mm-hmm. Really, ultimately, I consider myself an anarchist.
I was gonna say, I think that's just called anarchism.
Right. But at the same time, like a social anarchist, not like an anarcho-capitalist or like, kind of more of an anarcho-syndicalist. Anyway, the point being that, the basic premise there for me is to question all authority. And I do that in my life, and I very often find it lacking. And I think the people who can and should be authorities in any given area, and I think generally authority should be much more specific instead of, I don't think there should be any person who's as powerful as the president of the United States. I don't think that's a good thing.
Right.
I think power should be spread more broadly, right? That's one of the things about the Avengers is like you have these people who are so powerful, like Hulk or Thor is so powerful compared to other people on Earth. But it is if you can actually come up with a representative individual or group for like the people of Earth, then I think that person can oversee a group like the Avengers in a very fair way, right? In a very positive way. My number one problem with the Sokovia Awards, I say that so much.
With the Sokovia Awards.
Welcome to the
Tony Stark. You get the award for Biggest Jackass 2018.
Best Murderbot goes to Tony Stark and Bruce Banner as a supporting Murderbot artist. So my biggest problem with the Sokovia Accords is that it feels like it's saying you should not be responsible for your actions. You shouldn't be in charge of your actions. We're going to be in charge of your actions.
Right.
But the question is, why you? Right? It's like, well, there's the people who are acting, and they're the first logical option. And then, to me, if you want to try and have someone else responsible for their activities, you need to give me a better answer.
Yeah.
Right? Than Captain America. It's pretty, you could come up with a better answer than Tony Stark. Right. But, like, it's hard to come up with a better answer than Captain America, and you're certainly not going to do it with, like, Secretary Ross.
And so here's one of the first things I would propose to it, and tell me what you think about it. Something where the individuals get to make their decisions about when they intervene with the idea that there's, like, some kind of oversight body that when it's not a, like, momentary we have to act now, they can at least go to that group and be like, hey, here's what we're thinking of doing. What do you think? And that group would be comprised of both, powered and non-powered people. And as you said, pretty representative. But the other thing that I was thinking about is, because what I keep thinking of is like, well, okay, let's say the U.S. government says, fine, you can go deal with this problem in, Peru.
Right.
What about the people of Peru? Like,
yeah.
And so I'd love something where, like, every country on Earth, or maybe even every city, like however you divide it up, basically has to declare, like, yes, we are comfortable if the Avengers come and deal with this kind of problem in our area. Or, no, quite frankly, we would rather take our chances if there's that kind of problem in our area. We don't want the Avengers to come. Because I think, to me, that's one of the biggest problems is the kind of imperialist, colonialist idea that I see a lot of it, of where it's, these people have a problem, I'm going to go solve it. The thing that came into my head there was check out the hook because my DJ revolves it. Like,
We have passed that. It's now 1 a.m. in California.
Yeah, it is now 3 a.m. where I am. But putting Vanilla Ice aside, God, now it's stuck in my head.
Nobody puts Vanilla Ice in a corner.
Anyway, but yeah, that each locale, the Avengers have to say, like, okay, well, there's that problem happening in, Thailand, but the people of Thailand have said, like, they have, like, their own powered people there, and they don't, that they will ask for help. And, like, okay, I could go with that.
I like that a lot, especially if it's more city-based than nation-based, which anybody who knows about my feelings on nations and cities would obviously...
I mean, I think of myself as... I've lived in many other places. I think of myself as a New Yorker more than I think of myself as an American. So, yeah. I'm
for sure. For sure. Yeah. Like, I completely consider myself a New Yorker, and I don't at all consider myself an American, except, like, I have a passport for as long as that's valid. Hopefully they'll renew them someday.
Like any other country will let you enter. Come on.
Right, exactly. Oh, please just take me. Anyway, so, yeah, I think it's worth noting that, like, I don't really view Captain America as being, this sounds really weird, as being a representative of America by the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's made pretty clear that he's broken away from that.
Yeah. But I certainly, it's a bad look, particularly places that have been, subject to imperialism,
right,
which is like, the other places on Earth, basically. And so yeah, I think, with the caveat, like, if, an invading army from outer space comes in through, Canada, it's like, all right, look, like, this is an invading army from outer space. Like, what are we just going to let them, like, go into Canada and then, like, we'll, like, hold the U.S. border or whatever?
Yeah, I think there's a fairness to say, like, Canada, you get to decide if you want us to fix a Canadian problem. But if it's a worldwide problem that happens to be in Canada, like, YOLO, we're going to rebuild Toronto, like that's the...
Right, exactly. It's like, and that
Canadians, the list of audiences I've pissed off tonight. Sorry. Toronto's a lovely city. I'd hate to see it destroyed.
Toronto's a great city. I would, please take me. But, I think there's a big difference between what's going on in Civil War and before that Ultron, right?
Yeah.
Which are very earthly problems. They're problems created on Earth by Earthlings, right? And saying, like, yeah, the Avengers maybe shouldn't be in Nigeria without talking to the Nigerian government, or at least talking to, like, the mayor of Lagos or whatever, and, like, just being like, yeah, there's this guy, he's trying to steal some bioweapon, and we're gonna do whatever, without telling you about it. Like, I totally, I am on board with that, right? Whereas, in Infinity War, all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, I mean, they are actually invited to Wakanda by the king of Wakanda, so, they are basically sanctioned to be there. But, if it happened to be some other random place, it's like, yeah, you just go to that place, you try to do that thing, and then you figure it out later, because it's like, there's no, well, we have to let, Thanos snap his fingers there, like, we don't have jurisdiction. It's like,
well,
okay. And
here's also where we get into the problem that you've raised about, like, the problem that, if we're trusting all of these, local governments to tell us what is or isn't okay, that also depends on those governments being, fair and democratic. Because I could also easily see a situation where, some fascist dictator is in power because he's getting help from, evil superpowered people. And so that person's like, no, I speak for my country. And of course I don't want the Avengers to come. There is no problem here. Like, yeah. And I think that's where it gets very confusing.
Like Dr. Doom, even in the MCU.
Yeah. All of these things could become problems. And that's where I think, but it's a principle, it's the, like, if you can, you get buy-in from the local people. If you can, you get oversight from a group. And just to go, I kind of said as a throwaway, but I think one of the things to me that would be very important is the idea of that whoever has oversight does include people without powers. And I don't just mean someone like, Hawkeye, because he doesn't have, he has powers, but he still isn't like in that world. I mean, people who aren't fighters, because
right.
The other thing that I get worried,
civilians, if you will.
Because the other thing I get worried about is when you're a very, very good hammer, every problem looks like a nail kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's like when you're really good at fighting, like, and bad at diplomacy, it's like you might not try diplomacy in a spot where diplomacy is clearly the best option.
Right.
Because you're like, well, I'm just not good at that. I'm just going to fight.
Like, for example, if someone offers you Accords that you don't like or doesn't sign them and you really want them to sign them, Not to just blame Cap for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think those make some good senses. I think we kind of come to a decent idea. Anything else you would add to kind of like what accountability would look like in that perfect world?
I mean, the main thing to me is like, accountability to the people. Having, I mean, all right, if you have a world with people with that much power, it's like, should there still be governments that are as ridiculous as the ones that we have on Earth, like in our world?
I mean, probably not.
Right? I mean, like, should it be like, hey, Kim Jong-un, do you want us to come help you out with anything? Or like, should it be like, yeah, well, this is clearly a problem. And then, you've got imperialist issues, but you've also got like, I don't know, you've got a hostage situation with like 20 million people.
Right.
That's like a whole nother episode.
I mean, I think there's a fair statement though that like there's always a danger of a pendulum effect. Obama came in after way too much American imperialism, and it was horrible. And like he cut way back on the idea of that American forces can go and fix the world.
Right.
Part of what that meant was that when a Syrian dictator, like Obama said, you absolutely cannot use chemical weapons on your people. The dictator did it anyway, and Obama didn't do anything.
Right.
And I'm not saying that like I know enough about foreign policy to know he should have, but I know it kind of makes me wish he probably did something. But I don't know, and I think it all goes down to this. Yeah, that it's so easy for us to make these ideas being like, well, as long as there's perfect democracy, then we would do it this way, Of course,
there's just not.
Yeah. And
right?
I think that's also what it comes down to is like the people are imperfect, the governments are imperfect, the situations are imperfect. And so you kind of just got to stumble in the dark to find like what's the best thing. And I think if anything else, to me, that's the biggest problem I have with Sokovia Accords is that you're right. They're kind of an ultimatum, but they're also so final, Like to me, you really want something where it's like every 6 months we plan and like, check in again and see what's working, what's not.
Yeah, instead of like Accords, have it be like a long-term council, like a World Security Council. Wait, no, they did that. That didn't work well. But something that's more of a process than a proclamation.
Yeah. Two other things that I would add, and one of which I think makes for good movie making. The other, unfortunately, would make for terrible movie making, and so we'll never see it. But one is just send people out in teams, give them different personality types. Like, don't send 3 hotheads out to fight together. Like, give them someone who's a little...
How about don't send any hotheads out to fight?
Well, also true.
I know Hulk, I mean, he's kind of saved Earth and New York and all that and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Puny God. But, like, just overall, like, try to have people...
I'm going to say Frank Castle should probably not get sanctioned by any of these organizations.
Probably not.
But the other thing is, frankly, I would say, if you have someone is personally involved, you're off the case. Because, and I know it makes for good drama, but, frankly, there's a reason why, you're not supposed to be the lawyer or, the doctor in a case involving someone you love. You're not supposed to let that feeling compromise your professional integrity.
Right. You're supposed to recuse yourself. Right. The thing is, it's those are professions where there's, another lawyer or another doctor. Right. Or whatever. It's when there's, 6 or 8 Avengers or whatever, it's well... It's a little harder to be you sit this one out, Thor. Yeah. You're too emotionally invested.
And I keep wanting to compare this to the Justice League in my head, but you're right. In the Justice League, there's 80, 100 heroes?
In Justice League Unlimited, there's tons. Yeah. And in fact, the first episode, I think, of Justice League Unlimited, when they end up having a whole bunch, is they're going into some unnamed country that they don't have jurisdiction, which, like, I'm not sure, like, how they have jurisdiction in America or how all that works, but, like, where they're clearly not wanted, but they go anyway, and, like, it works out, you know, but it's like it raises the issue without really, like, addressing it.
And I think there is some, I mean, you know, it was an animated show ostensibly for kids, so it doesn't go in deep into it. But I think there is some mention of, like, there being, like, sort of official world sanction of the Justice League, and that, like, Amanda Waller kind of has an official role in regard to that, and, like, you know, Batman is kind of outside of that. Batman is kind of the captain. That's actually a really interesting idea.
Yeah, very much.
That I never even put this together, but it's interesting that in the Marvel world, it's the Superman character who is, you know, Captain America is very clearly a Superman kind of idea. He's a big Boy Scout.
Yes.
He's the one who goes against it. In DC, it's the Batman guy. It is Batman who was like, nah, I'm not signing the Sokovia Accords.
Right, who's more the Tony Stark from a standpoint of, you know, just like he's a billionaire, he's a playboy, he's got fancy toys, and he has no physical superpowers.
Right.
One thing I will say is if the Sokovia Accords were, like, presented at the beginning of the first Avengers movie, like, Cap would have signed them and Tony wouldn't.
Yeah, I think it's very true.
And I mean, that's almost like the premise, right? Is like Tony's the consultant. He's like, yeah, I didn't really want to sign up with the Avengers, you know?
Right.
And Cap's like, oh, what do you need me to do, Nick? You know?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing is, like, to me, so much of Civil War is the two of them both reacting to, like, them each seeing their particular worst nightmare happen, and now, like, that's where they come from. So
yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, we've now been talking about this for 15 hours, with 2 hours recorded. So I'm gonna go to sleep. Paul, are you going to bed, or are you gonna go start playing poker? What's your next step?
Yeah. I'm gonna go to work.
Okay.
I'm gonna go to work.
Good luck. But for you all,
on my couch.
Paul plays poker for a living. He's not. But yeah, for you all, what do you think? Where do you come down on these questions of accountability? Who do you think made the right choices? Like, what are issues we forgot about that we should get into? Would love to hear it. You can reach us at the best way to find us actually is strandedpanda.com, because we are a part of the Stranded Panda Podcast Network, and then just search for the Superhero Ethics page. But you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and on email at superheroethics, the email being at gmail.com. Would love to hear your feedback. Would love to hear your thoughts. I have recently launched along with Matt Carroll and Jeff Randall, the sort of heads of the Stranded Panda Network and the MCU cast. We recently launched the Pandavision podcast, where we basically kind of go deep on episode-by-episode reviews of TV shows that don't have, like, a verse and are kind of standalone. We've done The Boys and Umbrella Academy, and by the time this episode goes up, we should be just about to start our reviews of the second season of Umbrella Academy. And Paul, don't listen for 20 seconds. We may also try to rope Paul in for some of those episodes.
I've taken off my headphones.
Yeah.
Spoiler free.
There you go. So anyway, please check those out. Please let us know what you think about this episode. Give us your feeds. Give us your feed. Give us your thoughts. Give us your feedback. Give us your reviews. It'd be great to have. Check the other ones out. And on behalf of myself and Paul, thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.